Warner Oland, Laurence Olivier, Elizabeth Taylor, John Wayne, Jake Gyllenhaal, Angelina Jolie, and Johnny Depp. These actors, both past and present, have become legends of the silver screen in their own right for portraying historical and fictional iconic characters. Cleopatra, Genghis Khan, Othello, the Prince of Persia. At the time, their portrayals earned them Academy Awards, allowed them to become household names, and ultimately, they were hailed with praise as their transformative abilities as actors. The only issue with the amount of praise these actors earned was that they were all white, according to the Huffington Post in 2014. Despite having numerous actors in the golden age of Hollywood and beyond of various ethnicities and backgrounds who were capable of taking on these iconic roles. Unfortunately, whitewashing has not just been contained to Hollywood. Whitewashing of major American figureheads and textbooks has led to an uproar about the diverse narratives, or lack thereof, in our American history. While it began with popular culture portrayals, it has spread to our own real-life histories. Due to the serious implications this trend has on our understanding of historic figures and our own history as a country, it is imperative to explore the causes, effects, and discuss solutions to the terrifying trend that the Star Tribune of February 27, 2016 describes as a bleak image of Hollywood's blinkered vision. There are two causes to this trend of whitewashing our history and our entertainment industry. First, Hollywood capitalizes on rare diverse narratives it decides to show to audiences. And second, history looks more favorable upon white American populations when changed. First, Hollywood capitalizes on the rare diverse narratives it decides to show on screen. Naturally, Hollywood's main goal is to maximize its audience appeal. According to Hollywood, however, their maximum audience demographic are white individuals. Weaver's Iowa State University study in 2014 states that Hollywood believes they can only capitalize on their audiences because they believe their audiences are largely white, despite statistics found in Weaver's study that state that 44% of movie ticketgoers were African American in 2014. He goes on to say that Hollywood's sort of given up on the idea that you can have a crossover success with a minority cast. Weaver goes on to say that films are marketed to white audiences on a general scale, yet are very obviously marketed to minority audiences. Take movies that, for example, such as Selma, The Last Samurai, or 12 Years a Slave. They specifically focus on diverse narratives and have an all-diverse cast, yet there only seems to be one or two of these kinds of movies released every year or every other year. And New York Magazine in 2014 states that African American actors just don't sell overseas, noting that Hollywood tries to not only market to a white population within America, but believes that people across seas of different ethnicities and backgrounds also just want to see white audiences or white actors. Hollywood also whitewashes entire casts when it's based on true events. In the film 21, it describes the card heist of major Las Vegas casinos. The main character in the true story is played by Jim Sturgis, a British actor known for his singing abilities of Beatles songs in the 2000 film Across the Universe. However, in the real-life story, all of the people involved were of Asian descent, and the rest of the cast is also primarily white. Hollywood doesn't seem to think that these roles could have played by anyone else besides a person of color or other ethnicity. The severe lack of opportunity for actors of color to branch out of stereotypical roles, i.e. the action hero, the inept sidekick, or the token minority, or the smart guy. These actors of other ethnicities seem to be typecasted almost automatically when they audition. Aside from our entertainment industry, history also looks more favorably upon white Americans when it has been changed. The Victoria Advocate, a newspaper, in 2016 states that major historical moments often are altered to become generalized victories of white populations instead of acknowledging that there are still other issues to be solved. The Victoria Advocate cites the example of the 1960s civil rights movement. While many textbooks claim that it was a movement for voting rights as well as banishing Jim Crow laws, many advocates who are still around, as well as historical experts, say that the main focus of the 1960s rights movement was economic freedom, an issue that has still not been resolved even in 2016. Another example they cite is the removing of statues in the South of major political figures in the Civil War, such as Jefferson Davis or Robert E. Lee, as if they never existed or contributed to the time period. Smith, the writer for the Victoria Advocate article, goes on to argue that these memorials serve as reminders of our past, as well as reminders for us to do better as a population. If people try to rewrite history, they don't learn from it. We can't own up to our mistakes as a country or a white population if when we pretend that the people or the events that took place never even occurred. The Washington Post in 2015 also cites the example of good old Texas, who uses unauthorized textbooks that amplifies religious influence in our history, such as citing that Moses had a lot to do with our Constitution, and describes slavery as a, quote, side issue. The events are altered in order to make white individuals less incriminating. Leonard Pitts Jr. writes for the Miami Herald in 2015 and states that Black history is being erased from history books with intent of erasing ethnic histories, creating euphemisms, such as describing slavery as a side issue, cover up painful moments in our American history as a white population that we perpetrated, and also ultimately does more harm to minority populations. There are two harmful effects when whitewashing not only our entertainment industry, but our history as a population. First, this excludes diverse cultures and narratives. And second, it exposes our white privilege. First, it excludes diverse cultures and narratives. Thomas Shiro's 2014 study cites Hayden White, a rhetoric scholar who has spent most of his time studying the power of the narrative. In the study, White describes narrative as allowing for many different plausible versions of an event. This means that every account, no matter what viewpoint it's from, is completely valid and shouldn't be discredited based on where it comes from. For example, reading diverse narratives of a white founding father versus an African American who came to the country and the narrative surrounding the founding of our country should not be seen as better or worse than the other. This is based on the current trend of whitewashing. It ultimately ignores diverse narratives that speak from different viewpoints of the exact same event. Hayden White also goes on to claim that there aren't established grounds to make one narrative more realistic or credible than the other. They should both be considered legitimate. This trend of whitewashing indicates that we as a white population believe that the white narrative is more realistic, powerful, and legitimate than a diverse narrative from any other viewpoint. This could affect not only perspectives of history books, but also perspectives of young children who don't see any relatable narratives in their pop culture, their classrooms, or even their picture books. They might not see themselves as part of the grander American narrative, which is already exclusive enough, when in fact, if not their specific ancestors, their culture had a great impact on the American dialogue, and they don't get a chance to see that. Second, this trend exposes our white privilege. The USA Today in 2015, Thompson writes, "The entertainment industry is filled with celebrities with white blindness." Essentially, Thompson goes on to argue that many celebrities, such as Amy Schumer, have come out stating that they weren't aware of the adversities their diverse colleagues have had to face in audition processes or even in the entertainment industry as a whole. However, Thompson also states that they don't have to think about it because they haven't been exposed to it, exposing a greater issue that there hasn't been any dialogue or back and forth between white narratives and diverse people speaking out from their experiences within the entertainment industry. There is a difference in just recognizing that there's an issue, i.e. people coming out and saying that they weren't aware that this was happening, and those who actually recognize the issue and do something about it, such as speaking up. It has also become just ingrained in our society. In Brown's 2003 book, he explains that exclusion has become a key feature of the overall white identity. Racial differences that are seen as invisible to white Americans due to the fact that it doesn't affect us. So, we don't acknowledge it. When discussing white privilege, the narratives, ironically, that are most heard are white narratives, rather than coming from diverse populations. According to Greenberg in her 2015 article for Everyday Feminism, Greenberg goes on to explain that the narratives that children grow up with are 92% white infused, meaning young children from various backgrounds don't see their own cultural backgrounds, whether it's African American, Asian American, Hispanic, or Latino, represented. Greenberg also goes on to explain that 8% of children's picture books were only written by an African American author or featured an African American character. What can possibly be done about this? There are, thankfully, 2 solutions. First, let more voices be heard, please. And second, share these thoughts with others. First, we need to let more voices be heard as a society. We can start by supporting the arts, not just the local arts, but arts that have equal representation of diverse narratives and just actors. Unless you've been living under a rock or not into Broadway music, you probably have heard of the Hamilton musical that is taking Broadway, New York, and the country by storm. Not just for its riveting, freestyling rap style, but also that it is a show that features an all-diverse cast of nearly all African American or Hispanic actors with only a couple of white actors portrayed in small scenes, according to The Guardian in 2016. While it does share the classic founding story of America, which often is told from a white perspective in social and academic settings, when reflected through the eyes of a diverse cast, it allows for greater narratives to be more relatable for a greater melting pot culture that we have faced in the last few decades. And it is very prevalent considering the immigration issues in Syria, Libya, as well as Hispanic immigrants coming into our country on an almost daily basis. Lin-Manuel Miranda, the director and chief freestyler of this musical, tells Time magazine in 2015, "We have the opportunity to reclaim a history that some of us don't necessarily think is our own." So look for books, films, poetry, art pieces, anything you can see or you're interested in from diverse voices, authors, or perspectives. It will allow you to gain a greater understanding of where people come from and what they think about an issue that you might also be passionate about. Second, just share this information with everyone you can possibly think of. Your classrooms, your professors, they'll appreciate it if you stop by their office and talk about this. I'm almost positive. Ultimately, this will help you and others recognize about your own privilege in places you didn't even think you had it. The more people recognize that there is this dangerous trend of erasure in narrative pop culture and our history books, the more likely it is that there will be trends created in our own generation and beyond to do something about it. Not only will this create a ripple effect in social and academic circles, but if it's picked up enough, it could create a media firestorm that ultimately could lead to a change in media portrayal. Today, we have explored the causes, effects, and solutions, the dangerous trends of whitewashing, our entertainment industry, and our history books. Until there are more opportunities for actors, singers, and other artists, or even historical narratives to enter in our narrative and to share their passion and stories, our American culture will continue along its dangerous trend of fading from vibrant cultural color to indifferent shades of gray to stark, uninviting white.